This is an appeal to Remainers, to people who feel, at present, that this country is making the worst mistake it has ever made in its entire history. Those who feel scared, those who feel angry that what they see as an act of self-harm of epic proportions is being inflicted on a nation, on what they see as the votes of uneducated people who did not win a big enough mandate to make such an irrevocable and fundamental change. I understand how you feel. I can see the logic in what you think, and I can see the logic in why you think it. And in your passion to stop it, I see patriotism of the sort that those on my side, the Leave campaign, accuse you of not having. And the 16 million or so people who voted to remain in the European Union, many of them would have done it out of loyalty to Europe, possibly over the UK, but the vast majority of them did it out of their own patriotism for this country and their own desire to see this country prosper and do well. I believe that they did what they did in good faith, and I actually believe that the vast majority of them do what they do now, 2 years later, and everything they've done in the interim, in good faith. And I think it is very important that on both sides of this, we come back to seeing each other as good faith actors. Now, the only way we can do that is to understand that we are where we are today due to the actions of bad faith actors. Many people have been through divorce, and anyone who's been through a successful divorce knows this, that if it is to be done, it must be done quickly. And if it is to be done quickly, it is to be done quickly precisely to minimize the amount of pain that is caused and inflicted. And the problem with the actions of those in the political class who have been representing the Remain campaign, or at least claiming to, have been specifically designed to elongate and stretch out the period of pain under which this divorce and this split happens. And that reveals their bad faith, because that pain has been felt by the British public, it has been felt by the British economy, it has been felt by the British political system, and it has been felt by the European equivalents of all three of those. This divorce is happening because for 40 years we have wanted to do things our way, and the Europeans have wanted to do things their way. And due to the fact that we were part of their club, compromises were constantly having to be made, which meant that neither side was very happy, resulting in a very unhappy union. It hasn't been fair on the Europeans, and it isn't fair on us. And that is why Brexit has to happen. That is why Brexit will happen. And the only reason Brexit is going badly is because there is a small section of one side of the argument that wants it to go badly. And up until very recently, they were succeeding in that. We cannot needlessly extend the pain that either side has to feel because of this. And it is always better to have an amicable separation than an acrimonious separation. And the muddying of the water that has gone on in the last 2 years, mainly by the Remainers. Now, we can all talk about the lies told by some of the Leavers beforehand, but we must also talk about the lies told by the Remainers beforehand. And both sides haven't exactly covered themselves in glory since the result. But to those who say that this is not an overwhelming result, it is very, very disingenuous to make that point, because the referendum was carried out by the same election techniques and structures that are used for a general election. And in a general election, Sunderland races to put out the vote first and the result first. And in the referendum, Sunderland raced to put out the result first. That meant that every constituency gave a leave, remain answer. So we actually do know what would have happened if the referendum was a general election. And if it was a general election on the basis of remain and leave, Leave won 408 of the 650 seats in Parliament. That leaves 242 the Remainers. Once you factor in Sinn Féin, it's actually like 225 to help. People on the Remain side, I've seen this argument made many times. Why don't Sinn Féin come back to Parliament to help vote down Brexit? People who say these things do not understand our politics. And they have no place telling the Leavers that they're ignorant. Because if you think Sinn Féin are going to bend the knee to Her Majesty the Queen and swear her an oath of loyalty so that they can sit in our House of Commons, thereby acknowledging it and its suzerainty over the 6 counties in Northern Ireland, if you think Sinn Féin would ever do that, you don't understand British politics, and you should listen more than you talk. And many people on the Remain side make that argument, particularly on my wing of politics on the left. This separation is happening, and this separation needs to happen in the most peaceful, smooth way possible. For that to happen, the Remainers have to acknowledge that a separation is a separation. Now, when you divorce your partner, it's not a very good idea to carry on living in the same house. By the same token, when we divorce the European Union, it isn't going to be a very good idea for us to be in their single market and customs union. It won't be good for them, and it won't be good for us. It'll be the worst of all worlds. It'll be worse than staying in the European Union. Leave has to mean leave. Otherwise, the European Union must suffer, and so will we. So if you really want what's best for everybody, as many Remainers claim that they are, you really must think these things through and apply them, because democracy is a harsh fact. And 408 seats is a massive majority in the House of Commons. And with the organisational structures that exist today, using technology and using the internet, we have already seen how much change can be made. Jeremy Corbyn, as leader of the Labour Party, is living testament to this fact. The Leave vote can quite easily organise itself for a general election. It's going to be very easy to let those 17.4 million people know who it is they need to vote for in their constituency if they want Brexit. And they also know that they're going to have to vote for somebody that they can trust to put it through. That is why none of the politicians who are currently holding seats want a general election, because they know that all of their constituents will have been keeping an eye on them, particularly the ones who really want Brexit. And bear in mind, the Remain campaign had a status quo bias, which means there's not as many hardcore Remainers as there are hardcore Brexit voters. And that's from the simple fact that for Brexit to have won, and not just won, but won by 1.4 million, won 408 constituencies in the UK. For Brexit to have done that, it had to overwhelm and overcome the strongest status quo bias of any election in British history. And it did overcome it. And now that you've got that status quo bias working the other way, there is absolutely no way of getting people to change their mind on Brexit. The more you try and scupper it, the more you will remind British people just how much they value their vote. And they've already voted once. You gave them a yes or no answer. Would you like to leave the European Union, or would you like to remain in the European Union? And they said leave. The customs union is an attendant part of the European Union. The single market is an attendant part of the European Union. The European Court of Justice is an attendant part of the European Union. All of which they voted to leave. And it is bad faith to see it as anything else, and to muddy the water the way people are, is horrendous. The Labour Party has recently changed its wording. Before, they said they wanted a customs union. Now, I don't think that's very realistic. We're just going to have to come up with a free trade deal, and if the European Union doesn't want one on March 29th, 2019, I imagine by March 29th, 2020, they will want one. So that's the way negotiations go on that front. There are nearly 200 other countries out there in the world who operate on World Trade Organization rules, and for the Remainers to suggest that this is some sort of Mad Max style Wild West free-for-all is ridiculous. It's not. It's the way the rest of the world operates. It's really important that Leave voters stop calling Remainers traitors. Some of them are, I'm sure. Okay? I'm sure some of them are. But the vast majority of Remain voters voted for what they voted for because they felt it was best for their country. They voted for what they thought was best for their country. That is not the action of a traitor. And to say that to people will not do any good. It won't release any of the poison. None of the acrimony that is felt will be lanced. The boil will continue to grow. And we won't get anywhere. We will Brexit, but the country will be split. People say that we should have a second vote. We don't have a plebiscite tradition in this country. We are not Switzerland. We have a representative democracy. We've already stretched that a little bit by having one referendum. I do not want to fray the seams of our constitution anymore by having a second. If the British public are convinced by the Tony Blairs of this world that this is the worst disaster in the history of the UK, some might say Iraq would be a better candidate, but Tony Blair's obviously got a biased opinion on that. If the electorate think after we've enacted this that it was a mistake, you can reapply to be a member of the European Union. We'd probably have to drop sterling. We probably wouldn't get as good a deal as we had when we were in before. And that is the fact. We cannot accept something that is worse than what we have now as a direct consequence of figuring that we didn't want Brexit, because the benefits of Brexit depend on what you wanted. Personally, I'm a Tony Bennite. I wanted self-government. I get that. And anything that comes after that is to me neither here nor there, whether it be positive or negative. The fact that I get to govern myself and everyone other than the Lords and the Queen are elected, then fine. And it means I've only got two other things that I need to work on to get elected. Head of state and upper chamber. That's not the only benefits that are going to come from Brexit. There will be many benefits. And there will be some downsides. But the downsides come as a direct consequence of the benefits. You cannot have one without the other. And we chose to leave. Overwhelmingly. Now, I actually didn't vote in the referendum. I abstained because I don't like referenda. But I do know this, that there's millions of people like me that if the political class, having got an answer that they didn't like, dared to ask the British public again, people like me would register to vote, and we would vote to leave. So what the hardcore Remainers need to understand is there would be an even bigger leave vote if you asked for it again. Because as I explained earlier, the leave vote overcame the status quo bias that exists in all elections. And you've really got to start winding your messaging around that fact. Because everything you've done so far for the last 2 years has turned every Brexit voting person into somebody who really just wants Brexit to be gotten on with. Then you've got people from the Remain side who respect democracy and find the notion of undoing a democratic vote really scary. And I think that there are many on the Remain side that have completely underestimated just how terrifying that prospect is that the political class gets to ask us to keep voting until we give the right answer, you convert many Remainers into Brexiteers by doing and saying that. Now, as a strategist for the Brexit Leave side, I'd encourage you to do it. Keep doing it. Watch what happens in the ballot box in your Brexit constituencies. You're going to lose a lot of seats, and given that more seats voted Brexit, that means you're probably going to make it so that there is a very pro-Brexit government in any hypothetical general election. And it'll be on the basis you will have been the greatest advert for the thing you're trying to stop. And that pretty much sums up the whole reaction of the hardcore Remain campaign for the last 2 years. You have become the greatest adverts for Brexit, because everything you have done and said is anathema to the notion of respect of democracy, the will of the British public. You literally go on the national broadcaster that the British public is forced to pay for and then sneer at the notion of the will of the people. And it has astonished me that none of you have any advisors who are telling you how bad an idea that is and how bad an impression that makes in the mindset of the British voter and the British public, whether Remain or Leave. You should have acted in good faith from the very beginning. If you had gotten on board from the very beginning and said, well, we're all Brexiteers now, we really must make the best of this, because this is going to be a bit of a leap into the dark. People like me would have told other people on the Leave side, we need to accept this and we need to offer them compromises, because this shows that they're getting on board the Brexit boat. But you didn't. Not one of you stepped on board that boat and meant it, and in a genuine good faith manner. The only time any Remainers came on board the Brexit boat was to try and sink it. You came on and suggested a customs union, which is essentially tethering us to the continent. You came on and suggested a single market, again tethering us to the continent. What was voted for was the total opposite of that. You cannot offer people the opposite of what they voted for and tell them it's what they voted for. People are not stupid. Which brings me to my final point. The way you have, and the media class have got a lot to answer for in this, and I work in the new media, right? I know how useless the press is because I outperform them daily. And I don't have any of their funding. I borrow other people's Wi-Fi and electricity to do it. And the notion that you thought that calling people thick or dupes or ill-informed when they had spent 40 years and more researching why they wanted to leave the European Union, or the EEC as it was before that, or the European Coal and Steel Community as it was before that. The people who've wanted Brexit have wanted Brexit for a very long time. And they know exactly why they want it. You have got it completely backwards. It is the Remainers who didn't know what they were selling. In all of the time that you had to sell the notion of remaining, with all of the status quo bias that you had on your side, with every single person in the political class, the vast majority of whom support and supported remaining in the European Union. With all of that on your side, you still couldn't convince the British public of what you were saying. It wasn't a rebellion against Cameron. It wasn't a protest vote. It was not a Molotov cocktail thrown at the British political system. It was a controlled explosion right on all of the links that were tying us to Europe, which the British public know instinctively in the marrow of their bones has not been helping them very much for the last 40 years. You speak of rights. Most of the continent didn't even have habeas corpus until midway through the 20th century. How dare you preach to us about how Europe has defended our rights? We are British. We fought for our own rights. Rights are not gifts from government. They are things we took from your political class ourselves by our own power and our own strength. And it has been that way since the ancient days of the Witan. No taxation without representation, I don't pick the Commission. End of story. That's why we're leaving the European Union. It's that simple. We have a different mindset and a different way of doing things, and we always have. The European Union likes to have everything written out, every T crossed and every line dotted, before it even takes a single step forward. We like to figure things out as we go along, and we have always been that way. And for you to denigrate that national characteristic when it's the thing that created much of the modern Western world is insulting. And you have betrayed something I didn't think was true of our political class very much. And I certainly don't think it's true of the vast majority of Remain voters. But what has been revealed is that there are many people who are sitting in our House of Commons who do not like this country, do not like the people who live in it, do not like the working classes that voted for what we're doing now and leaving the European Union, and think that they know better. And you are going to be taught, if you stick to that attitude, you are going to be taught a very, very harsh lesson. And any political party that supports what you're doing is going to be taught a very harsh lesson too. If the Tories betray Brexit, the Conservative Party will be consigned to history like the Whigs. And if the Labour Party does the same, they're even more at risk of being consigned to history. There are many people who voted Leave. 2/3 of Labour constituencies voted Leave. 3/4 of Tory constituencies voted Leave. The notion that this was a close-run thing is as big a myth as the notion that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. Winning California and New York states gives you the popular vote, granted. It misses out 49 other states. So, and it's very ironic to me that the same people that question the electoral college system in the USA, which is in essence proportional representation extrapolated to account for geographical differences, they are the same people who ask for proportional representation in our first past the post system. And if you think the British public does not see the hypocrisy / cognitive dissonance of your positions on all of these things, you are wrong. If the Labour Party doesn't think it's worrying that Tommy Robinson can get 70,000 people to come and support him at his rallies when the membership of Momentum, the thing that made Jeremy Corbyn leader of the Labour Party, is what, 30,000? If you don't think those two numbers relate and that that's an issue for you, you are wrong, because Tommy Robinson has got the working class following him. And the Labour Party is losing that working class whilst telling them that they're stupid, ignorant, knuckle-dragging Brexiters. And that is literally the Labour Party policy at the moment. We have changed from saying we want a customs union to saying we want the customs union. We don't want either. That's not what was voted for. If you put that to the electorate in your Leave voting constituencies, you are going to lose. And it doesn't matter what the polls say. The polls have been wrong for the last 15 years. That's why the political class has been in full-blown panic mode for the last 3. It's very important that we all just sort of come together now, realise that we're going through a divorce. Divorces are like ripping off a plaster, and if you're going to do that, it's best to do it quickly. And please, on a final note, please just stop the thing about crashing out of the European Union. The World Trade Organization is not run by the cast of Mad Max, and for you to act like it does is an insult to the entire world that obeys those rules and trades under them. Many, many developing nations are going to get much richer now that they can have untrammeled access to British markets instead of having to go through the common agricultural policies of the European Union. For the left to have been weaponized by Tony Blair like this. Margaret Thatcher once said that Tony Blair was her greatest achievement. And I think I've lived to see the day where she was proven wrong on that. Because Tony Benn would tell you that for the left to have been so vociferous and unanimous in its support for the European Union would have turned his stomach green. And for you to not understand that by asking and advocating for continued membership of Margaret Thatcher's single market would also have turned his stomach green. He would have felt that his entire life, coming to all of your rallies, speaking up for you when you were being attacked, and leading you when everybody else in the British political system was castigating you as traitor communists. He would have felt all of that was a waste of time, because in essence it was. I'm starting to think that the pro-Remain Labour membership, the pro-single market Labour membership, is Margaret Thatcher's greatest achievement. And it breaks my heart to think so. That's what I think, and I'm the editor of Nye Bevan News. So God only knows what the rest of the working class who we've already lost think about us. It's not going to be positive, I can tell you that much. Please leave a like, or well, if it's on Facebook, I imagine, because this is going to be going out to a lot of Labour people. There's not going to be very many of those. Make sure you pick the angry emoticon, because it's good for the algorithm. Share this, and please let me know what you think in response, because this is my first podcast. I'd just like to thank, in inverted commas, Joe Blogs, the man behind the scenes, for making all this stuff happen, and for asking me to come back and become editor again, because I had a lot of messages from people like him who said, if you don't carry on speaking up for the Leave side from a Labour position, there is literally no one else doing so, and we're probably going to lose a lot of seats. And the thing that really depresses me about that fact is I'm not being paid to do any of this. The Labour Party despises me, so does most of its membership, and they all seem intent on crashing their electoral chances into the rocks known as Stop Brexit. So yeah, if you like this podcast, then please give it a like and a share, and I'll see you again next week. Thanks, bye.